Hey guys, welcome back to Learning Curve Tech, where I learn tech with you. This video is not a color grading tutorial. Instead, it is more of a look at my color grading workflow so you can get some ideas and inspiration for your own color grading workflows. Also, before we begin, let me know in the comments below what your color grading workflow and also what your color grading style is. That being said, let's get started. So the first thing I actually do before I even import my clips into DaVinci Resolve is changing the color settings in my camera. I use the Panasonic GH4, but whatever camera you use, it should have some color settings that you could be able to tweak, and it might even have pretty similar color settings as the GH4. So in the color settings, I like to drop the sharpness, the noise reduction, and the saturation. This way I can get as close to a natural image as possible. Most cameras tend to oversaturate, over-sharpen, and add a lot of noise reduction, which can really reduce the quality of your image, so I tend to turn those down so they don't mess up my image too much, and so I get close to the natural image as possible. However, I wouldn't mess with contrast too much because most cameras have a set dynamic range, and if you change the contrast, it could end up making your image look even worse. Now at this point, I usually like to set my custom white balance. White balance is basically just whether your image is really white or really yellow. It helps if you know the color temperature of your lights, so you can pretty much just set that in your camera and you'll be pretty close to what the actual color of the light is. And to make it even more accurate, I usually like to hold up a piece of paper so I can go into DaVinci Resolve later and just take the eyedropper and click my custom white balance right from the paper. And if you don't know what I just said there, you'll see later, so make sure to stick around. Also, another thing that can make your color grading process a lot easier in camera is actually just having a contrasted background like the one behind me. If you're a regular watcher of my videos, you probably know that the background behind me, the wall behind me, used to be all beige. The problem with beige is that it was the exact same color as my skin, so it did make it very difficult to color grade. So I recently repainted it, and that's why I was gone for 2 weeks. Now, once you're done dialing in all your settings, now we're gonna go over to DaVinci Resolve. So the first thing I do is import my clips into DaVinci Resolve. Then before I start doing all the other editing and adding sound effects, I will first do the color grade. This is because it's much easier just to color grade one big clip than having all the cut up clips and having to color grade all of those. Just trust me, it saves a lot of time to color grade before you do anything else. Now before I color grade my clips, I always color correct them. Color correcting is basically just getting your image to look as close to the original as possible. Color grading is giving your image a style. For color correction, the first thing I do is set the correct white balance. That's why we held up the paper earlier, so I could set it on a white surface. Now after I correct the white balance, and actually after I do every step, I'll add a node because this makes it easier to go back and change that setting if I want to without having to basically redo the entire color grade. On the next node, I'll correct the contrast. Usually I don't need to do this too much because my GH4 already has a ton of contrast, but sometimes I'll add just a tiny bit. Now I also increase the saturation just a little bit, but I prefer a vintage style, so I tend not to add too much contrast and too much saturation because I prefer more of the toned down sort of style, if you know what I mean. Okay, now once we're done color correcting, we can color grade. By the way, if you're finding this video helpful so far, please hit the like button, because when you do so, YouTube will show this video to more people who can then learn from this video. Then they in turn can do their part by hitting the like button so that even more people can find this video. Now it's time to color grade. Like I said earlier, I prefer a vintage style color grade without too much contrast or too much saturation. Also, I prefer to have more of an orange skin tone with more of a teal background, and this is actually a pretty well-known concept in color grading called orange and teal. The reason a lot of color grades are like this is because orange and teal are on opposite sides of the color wheel, so they are very contrasting colors. And since most people's skin tones are fairly orange, a teal background is what most people go for in their color grades. Now I'm not necessarily for the orange and teal look or against the orange and teal look. I think it has its place, but I do think it looks pretty good for most situations. I don't usually go for a crazy orange and teal look, but I do kind of tweak it a little bit so the skin tones are more orange and the background is just a little bit more teal. Does that make sense? Okay, so to change the skin tone, I'll add a mask. What a mask does is it enables me to just tweak the skin tones instead of tweaking the entire picture and changing the entire image to being all orange. Also, when you're making a mask, a contrasting background like the one behind me will really help because the computer will be able to figure out which parts of your image are orange, since that will stand out against your background. After I make the mask, I'll usually section off a portion of my skin tone, and then I'll go to the vector scope. In DaVinci Resolve, the vector scope has this handy dandy little line that shows you where exactly your skin tone should be. Now all I do is tweak it a little bit to get it right on the line. Now once the skin tones are how I want them to be, I usually like to add a vignette. I feel that for YouTube videos, vignettes really help to kind of bring more of a spotlight to the subject rather than having distracting things in the background that might get the viewer's attention off of the subject. It's just my personal opinion, so you can do whatever you want. Also, I don't do a really strong vignette, I kind of just do a very subtle one so that it just makes a slight effect. Now after I'm done color grading, I'll drop the clip into the power grade bin. This basically transfers the color grade to any new project that I open. This way I can just go to a new project, drag and drop the color grade, and just tweak a few settings, and it'll be good to go. So really, after I color grade this video, I might not really have to color grade any other videos that much at all. This really will save a lot of time, so I'm looking forward to using it. If you like this video, check out one of these videos to learn more about lighting. If you are still here, you must now subscribe. If you are still here, you can drop a comment. If you are still here, you can rewatch the video. Thanks for still being here, but really, the video's over.